All right, so today we're going to be going over word problems, specifically with our compound interest that we've been going over in the past. So what I want you guys to do is start with the opener. First one, we're just converting these into decimals, so 12.5% and then 3.5%. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes. Get started. Yeah, converting those into decimals. So I know that this has kind of been an area of struggle for us, specifically when it comes to B, so I want to make sure that we're getting extra practice. So either way, you just division one, that's okay.
I still missing my other one. Just starting.
Okay, that's what I need.
I don't know where I can take that.
Well, it didn't ring. Okay. Well, I don't think this thing rings, so I'm just going to assume that it went off because it's no longer ticking. All right. Number A, converting 12.5% into decimal form. Who thinks they got the answer? Me. What do we got?
0.125.
0.125. Good. Now, 2 ways that we could have done this. First way, we just move decimals, right? We're here, move it back 2, and that's how we get our 0.125. Second way is through division. Now remember, all percentages are out of 100%. So if we're going to turn it to decimal form, we need to divide by that 100%. Just like in all division, the percents cancel out, and now we're just left with 12.5 divided by 100, and you'll get the same 1.25. All right, part B. Who's got it? 0.035. Now, I explained both of these methods a little bit earlier. Which one did you use for that one? Division? Did anyone use this one? You used a pushback method?
Yeah.
Did you get the same answer?
Yep.
Okay.
I guess 0.035.
Perfect, 0.035. All right, one little thing to make sure that we're doing. When we're moving the decimal place back, and this trips us up, and this is why I wanted to make sure I had this one on here. When we move it back twice, sometimes we forget the extra space that it opened up. When there is that extra space, so if you do like this method, fill in your spaces with zeros. So when you fill in that space with zeros, when you move it back, that's how we get the 0.35 using this method. This works great when you're just moving back into it being into the front, but sometimes we forget with that, and that's why I always like to introduce this method as well. Just dividing by 100. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of actually what the compound interest is. Now for compound interest, that's just the interest added over more than once a year. You're going to earn money on your interest, so remember when we talked about the other one where there was adding or subtracting with interest, it's always going to be addition. So when we're building up our equation, don't confuse it with any subtraction things. It's always going to be addition. Some of those key terms, and we're going to touch on what that means a little bit later, but annually, that's 1 time a year. Semi-annually, 2 times a year. Quarterly, 4 times a year. And then monthly, 12 times a year. So the reason why, how many months are in a year?
12.
12. So if it's compounded monthly, 12 times a year. Quarterly, how many quarters are in a dollar? 4. 4 times a year. Semi-annually. Let's see, you guys had world history before. The semi-hemisphere or something like that, semisphere. I think that sounds right in my head. But that's half the world. How many halves are in a whole? 2. Annually, that just means a year. How many years are in a year? 1. That's where this concept comes from. All right, now let's look at what the actual formula looks like. P, like I said, we're going to be adding 1 plus R. This time we're dividing by n. N being what we just talked about, those specific numbers or those specific words. And I'm going to clarify that a little bit more. To the power of n times t. Now, P is your principal. That's always going to be the initial amount. So if I said you're starting with $1,000, your P is going to be $1,000. If you took out a loan that gains interest of $600 to pay off your school bills, that's going to be your initial money. You borrow $5 from your buddy and they're just like, all right, but you got to pay me back in interest. That $5 is where you're starting when it comes to building up interest. And if that does happen, you get better friends. Next, the rate. That's the percentage of what you're actually going to be using. So when we looked at those percentages from the warm-up, whenever you see something in a percentage, that is what our rate is going to be. So interest rate as a decimal, that's just saying whatever that percentage value is that's going to be in the equation as a decimal. So we'll use the same skills that we used from the warm-up in that specific setting. Next, n number of times of years, compounding interest. All those fun buzzwords we just talked about in the slide before, that's where you're going to figure out your n. How many times per year did I actually compound that interest? And then t, that's your time in years. So this will always be preferenced with the phrase of something like in 4 years, or after 8 years, or in 11 years, something along the lines of that. So if it has years following, not yearly, years, that's where you're going to find your t. Any questions on that? Now, n terms. It's provided with the specific terms. If you see annually, n is equal to 1. If you see semi-annually, n is equal to 2. If you see the word quarterly, n is equal to 4. Monthly, n is equal to 12. So just by breaking down what your word problem says, you can already identify what n is going to be just by the term that we use. So annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly. So by breaking these specifically down, that'll already give you one of your specific values in the 4 that you need to find. So pay attention for these specific buzzwords. Make sure those are written down so you know what your N is going to be used. Give you a quick second to write each of these kind of down. So if you see annually, make sure that your N value is going to be 1. Semi-annually, N equals 2. Quarterly, N equals 4, and monthly, N equals 12. After this, we're going to go over some examples. And if I am going too fast and you want to just take a picture of this specific slide, because it wasn't on the previous slides that we went over, feel free to do so. Just ask me to step out of the way because I don't need to end up on whatever you guys post. I deleted my Instagram.
Like the side of the face.
Right. So now we're going to go over some examples, or let's actually just go over the quick steps first. First step, identify the key terms. Remember that's P, R, T, and N. From there, just build up your equation. So use that P value where you see P. Use that R value where you see R. Use that N value wherever you see N. Use that T value wherever you see T. Only reason why I'm putting parentheses right here is just to remind you that it's multiplication. I don't want you to think, oh, it's happening annually for 5 years, and you leave it as 15. It's 1 times 5. Trust me, I literally corrected that mistake yesterday, so that's why I want to make sure that I'm over-explaining this. And then from there, use those order of operations. Remember, when we were talking about order of operations, and we went over that a little bit earlier, how many of us have seen PEMDAS? Me. Good. So when we're starting with PEMDAS, everything inside of our function / our parentheses is what you're going to deal with first. Then we work on our exponents. So we start with everything in here. This will be our first step. Add those. Then we expand out into our second step. Notice, P isn't a part of that second step because P isn't part of this exponent. The exponent, what's a good way of saying this? Like Lion King. Simba's looking over the mountains. We don't go over there, Simba. This is the dark side. This is the dark side of the land. Simba doesn't travel there yet. Then we move our exponent. Then, from there, we can start multiplying. Mufasa's gone now. Simba can go.
Oh, I'm Mufasa. I ain't go nowhere.
So make sure we're doing this in our specific order that we need to. Just remember, exponents, when you see it on the paper that we're about to go over, it's the smaller numbers that are elevated. Too many times we get kind of that idea that this is multiplication. No, exponents are their own things. And I'll show you guys a little bit how to use it in your calculators if you have any questions on that. And then add and subtract, but there's no real add and subtraction here. All right, so let's go on to our first example. All right, so as we talked about before, let's do our first step. Let's figure out what our P is. Let's figure out what our N is. R and T. So we read the equation and we figure out what specific portion goes to what. You invested $39,400 at 5% compounded semi-annually for 7 years. What is your total return in this investment? So we look at this equation the same way that we wanted to break it down when we talked about it earlier. P, where am I starting from? We have that initial investment of $39,400. So your P is your initial investment, that's where you start. So our P in this instant is going to be $39,400. Next, we can choose, do we want to go to N, R, or T? Well, let's just do N. So we continue reading at 5%. Compounded semi-annual. Those are our buzzwords. If we remember, semi-annually means N is equal to what? 2. So since we saw the term semi-annually, that spikes up, that N needs to be equal to 2. We never use this laser pointer, so this is fine. Next, we go into R. R, like we said before, is always going to be that percentage. So when we're reading through this specific one, let's find where the percentage is. Boom, 5%. So we just start writing it out normally, 5%. Then we need to remember that we need to change it into a decimal. I'm going to do it both ways so you guys see it, but choose the way that is easier for you. Starting at 5%, imaginary decimal here, move it back 2, fill in that point by percentage. So as a decimal, it's 0.05, or 5% divided by 100%. Percentages cancel each other out. 5 divided by 100, you type that in your calculator. Oh golly gee, we get the same answer. So now we have our P, N, and R. Next, T. How many years are we doing this for?
2.
2?
Oh no, that one's 7 years. The R is a 2.
Yes, semi-annually, that'll be our N. T is our 7. Because remember, T always follows with years. So we have that. Now let's just set it up. We use that same equation. A equals P 1 plus R over N. N T. P we said was 39,400. 1 plus R we said was 0.05 because we had to turn it to an actual number and not leave it as percentage. Then N we said was 2 because it was semi-annually. Next we said N is 2. And then T we said was 7 years. Now let's go through solving this using our order of operations. Inside the parentheses, or right up here.
0.025.
First, when it's inside the parentheses, we just go through the order again. So there's no parentheses inside those parentheses, there's no exponents, there is division in here. So let's start with dividing those ones out first. 0.05 over 2 is
0.025.
0.025. Thank you. And there are shortcuts, like you can just simplify this and this before you go on, like we do in class some of the other time, but I'm just showing you each individual step. Also, you can just type it straight in your calculator like that. We figured that out yesterday, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So from here, continue adding into the parentheses. These add to 1.025. And we simplify our exponents, because that's going to be our next step, and we don't want to just jump into there. 2 times 7 is
14.
14.
It goes
Again,
55.
type this straight in your calculator if you want, or Keep following your order of operations.
Equals 55,671.17.
Is that with this? Just type straight in?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go straight from that. Say that one more time.
55,671.17. If we round it, because it's 16 and then 8, but we round it to 17.
Okay, perfect. Oh, no, that's not the one I want. That is 671.17. That's not a 2, that's a 7. These things don't like me. There we go. So that should be how we did number 1. Do we have any questions on how I set that up? Yeah.
Could you get 0.025?
0.025. So if we put this straight into our calculator, 0.05 divided by 2. Does that make sense now? Is that a shoulder? What's up? No. This is room 33.
No, we're for them to go.
Oh, okay. Wait, where are you looking for?
Table for news.
I don't know why it says M12. Try M11.
Okay. Thank you, Coach.
Yep. All right, we ready to move on?
Yes.
Got everything that we need? Steven, I know that you were out, so do you want to take a picture of this?
I don't even got my phone, so.
Okay. All right. Now, if you want to move on to the next couple ones after you finish up, you're good. I'm gonna just go over these ones. Oop. There we go. All right, next, step 1. Before you even read it, get into this habit. P, R, N, T. Get into the habit of labeling, because when you label, this reminds us this is what I'm looking through. These are the key things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for my P. Where am I starting? I'm looking for my R. What rate is it changing? My N. How many times am I compounding it a year? And then T. How many years am I doing that for? So get in the habit so that when you're doing this, you can understand where it's coming from. All right. Yes.
Semi means 2, right?
Say that again.
Semi-annual means 2.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to try something. When I'm reading this, if you see that any of these are answered, just say stop. And tell me which one we're stopping for, okay? You borrowed $104,000 for 4 years at 10.9%, and the interest is compounded annually. What is the total you will pay back? Did anyone catch any of these in that reading? P? What was P? 4? What else did we catch?
T is 4.
T is 4. 4 years.
N is 1. It is annually.
N is 1 because it said annually. And I'm just going to write that in parentheses right here. I'm not multiplying by annually, but just a quick reminder. Anything else? R is 10.9%. Can I leave it at 10.9%?
No, it would go to 0.109.
0.109. All right. Let's set up the equation. You don't have to do this. I am going to do this every time. You don't have to do this on your test. You should be doing it right now. I'm going to rewrite this every time, just so I know what I'm putting in what. P gets replaced with 1, 0, 4, 3 zeros. 1 is its own number, it's going to stay. R is replaced with 0.109. N is replaced with 1. N is replaced with 1. T is replaced with 4. So now let's just clean it up. I'm going to clean this up first. 1 times 4, 4. Clean this up because it's simple division, because anything divided by 1 is itself, right? You remember that fact? 0.19 or 109 divided by 1 is 0.10. All right, order of operations. Parentheses, 1 plus 0.09. When there's nothing in front of it, the 1 just takes over the place. So all it does is become this. It's just filling spots, but instead of filling that with a 0, it's filling it with a 1, just because it's being added to it. Okay, we did it inside the parentheses. Next, you can just solve it from this way, or you can use your exponents. What do we want to do? Just solve it from there? All right, what's our answer?
50,000. Yeah, wait. Yeah, 50,700. No, 100,500. 5,700 to 311.60. Is that? It's just too long.
It's yeah. 1,000. Oh, what's going on? Oh, I'm just on my eraser. 157,311.16. Now, I get the 1/6. You got it. 0.7. So then it's got to stay 0.00. Does that make sense? If it was just like 0.7, then you can get rid of the 0. But anything after the decimals need to stay in their place. Correct. Yeah. All right. Quick thing, the reason why I rounded up. Remember, this is money, so we're only dealing with those 2 places. If it's anything above 5, this number goes up. If it's anything, so let's just put 5 plus. If it's 4 and below, it stays the same. And when you're dealing with money, you want to deal with your cents, right? You don't want to lose any money. Let me get you back your calculator. Yeah.
With this one, I don't know how to do too much math, because it cannot really just give me the whole thing
Yeah.
just by 1.
Hey, if you are good enough with your calculator and you can do that, setting it up is just the hardest part.
Yeah, I know.
And typing it in. All right. So, what I'm going to do now is just tell you one thing. We're going to continue working on this assignment, but if you finish early, I put something extra on Google Classroom that will help you. All it is, identifying all these, highlight wherever you see the P, highlight in that color. Wherever you see the N, highlight in that color. R, highlight in that color, and T, highlight in that color. So it's on Google Classroom. Extra practice if you get done early. And it's also got a little segment where you can write a question that I might use on the next